Hi there, my name is Kim McGuire, and I'm a coach and consultant with Fortune Management, and I've been doing this for well over 20 years. Nationally, I am the Chief Operating Officer of the whole entire company, and locally, I run the territory that covers the whole state of Colorado. And I'm super excited to be here with my good friend Curtis Crandall because the two of us have literally coached hundreds of doctors throughout the year, and we're very passionate about planning your year and creating awesome goals for 2025. Hi, Curtis.
How's it going, Kim? Beautiful introduction to yourself. And for myself, I've been with Fortune for about 12 years now. I actually started as a client of Fortune first. I also own and operate 5 dental practices in the Western Pennsylvania area. And as a coach for our clients, I serve pretty much all of Western Pennsylvania, all of West Virginia, and the majority of the state of Ohio. So excited to be here to talk about annual planning, one of my passionate discussions that I get to have a few times a year.
That's exactly right. Yes, it's so fun to talk about this because both you and I are passionate about goal setting and helping our doctors make really intentional goals and making sure that we're tracking them and everything. So let's talk a little bit about, Curtis, what do you think people really need, or what do you think dentists really need to be taking a look at when they're planning their goals for 2025? And what are some of maybe the common mistakes that you see out there?
Yeah, for sure. So, anytime I'm going to annual planning with a doctor and essentially eventually their team, I always have to start with the doctor first. I want to know what their goals are because as much as we want the team to be part of that annual planning process, I think it is mission critical to really have the doctor define what's important to them as well first, right? You know, on a lot of different levels, but I'm going to talk monetarily here for a minute because I think that we want our teams to share in that monetary goal. We need to make sure it's set appropriately, right? We need to make sure that the doctor knows what they need to make in the form of income for doing chairside dentistry. We also make sure that our doctors are getting paid for being the CEO and chief clinical advisor. And then also we want to make sure that our doctors are driving a certain percentage of profit to the bottom line. So before I would ever involve the team in the aspect of annual planning, I would want to make sure that the doctor has very well thought through what they need to do in the form of their compensation, right? And also one more piece I would add to it is it's just not what they need to earn in the form of compensation. They have to figure out first what their break-even point is, right? Because they
Yes.
have that drop-dead number that they have to pay all their bills. And then also they've got maybe a drop-dead number that they have to get paid themselves. And then maybe that higher audacious goal rather, that they want to maybe strive and grow for. So it always starts with the doctor.
Exactly. And I think so many of them, Curtis, don't even know what their profitability is or don't even know what their band number is, the basic amount of money that the practice needs to collect in order for them to pay all their bills. I also think it's important for them to not just say, oh, I want to grow by 10% because that's just an arbitrary number. They need to know, again, what they've done this year with all the KPIs and all of the profitability metrics, and then take a look at next year. And then some of the things they also need to consider are, what does my team look like? What kind of CE do I want to do next year? Are there technology investments that I want to be making or expansion
Absolutely.
investments? So that just, that obviously takes money. So we've got to work backwards and make sure we know what would, December 31st of 2025 look like, and let's work backwards and make sure we're planning for that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And Kim, one thing that I think about often that I'd love to get your input on is, what are some of your effective strategies that you go to for creating maybe that strategic plan or that blueprint that you kind of gravitate towards in order to help your doctors achieve those goals?
Well, for one thing, absolutely. For one thing, we're taking a look at the doctor's vision for their life, really, and for their practice, and making sure that all the decisions that they're making on their strategic plan are moving towards their vision rather than away from it. So taking a look at their leadership is a huge part of the strategic plan, and if they're sticking with their vision, because you're not going to be everybody's dentist. You've got to make sure that you know what you really want out of this practice and out of your life. However, I'd really look at the 5 business engines. I mean, to be real simplistic about it, we got to make sure that we know what we want our finances to look like. We've got to make sure in our profitability, we got to make sure we know what we want our systems to look like and what needs to be tweaked for next year. We got to know what our people engine looks like. Do I have the team to get me to the next place or to the next level? And what's it going to take to either lead my current team or bring on new team members to get me there? Then, of course, there's marketing and branding, and that's a whole subject unto itself. But how am I going to attract the patients into my practice and do the dentistry that I want to do? and enroll the patients into the dentistry that I want to do. And then, of course, lastly, my clinical and technology vision. What kind of clinical dentistry do I want to be doing next year? What am I passionate about? Maybe what technology. Hopefully you don't have technology that's collecting dust in the corner, that we're actually utilizing our technology and really raising the standard of care for our patients. So that's one structure. What would you say to that, Curtis?
As basic as that might sound, I feel that, we spend time on creating these great annual plans, right? We talk about the 5 business engines, we set goals on them. But what I really know is essential is that you've got your plan, you've got it written down, and you know how to retrieve it throughout the year so you can check on it. It doesn't just end up in a drawer somewhere or in some file folder on a computer, but you've got a way to recall that. You got a way
Yep.
to check in with that. I would say, monthly at a minimum, in order to make sure you're driving in the right direction.
Exactly. And for sure, the monitoring and measuring and monitoring consistently on all of the metrics that we have determined during our annual planning session. Also, chunking it down, we can talk more about systems, but to scheduling the goal and really how am I going to actually physically implement that into my practice. I also think that the measuring and monitoring, one of the themes this year for our annual planning, as you know, is James Clear's Atomic Habits. And
Yes.
I'm always reminded of my most favorite quote that he has in that whole entire book, and it's chock full of amazing quotes, right? But we don't fall to the level of or we don't rise to the level of our systems. We fall to the level of our habits. So what habits are we putting in place as a team to really hit all of those goals? So I think that's
Yes.
massively, massively important.
Yep.
And
Yeah, I love it.
Curtis, if I know one thing, you are passionate about KPIs and analytics. So talk to us a little bit about the analytics that a practice needs to implement in order to hit their goals.
Yeah, I mean, we got to look at a lot of them. We got to look at all the basic ones, your production, your collections, your adjustments. You have to understand what those are. You have to look at your new patient numbers. I've been really into procedure mix as of the last few years, right? Quantities of certain procedures that you want to do more of, which, on the lead measurement would be how many times you're actually diagnosing that procedure.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So taking a look at, maybe the past 12 months and saying, okay, well, I want to do X amount of implants. Well, how many times did you actually present or propose an implant for a patient versus how many times it was completed? Right. I think that's very important. I will just speak to a little bit about KPIs and numbers. Sometimes people can get kind of weird when it comes to numbers, but what I always say, and I think it's important that we all get in touch with, is that a number is not necessarily right or wrong. Where you are right now is not right or wrong. It's just a starting place, right? And if we don't identify with where we're starting, it's going to be almost impossible to grow to where we want to go.
Yeah.
So I recommend you set your ego on the shelf, identify where you truly are, right? And be honest with your team in order to create a great plan for growth as it pertains to, production, collections, quantities of certain procedures, that kind of thing. So just be open to being honest with where you currently are with your numbers.
What I love about your focus on the service mix, Curtis, is that more and more, as our industry changes, there's a lot of ways that our doctors can absolutely survive and thrive being a private practitioner. However, creating a service mix where you're doing some more advanced procedures and more specialty procedures is the single easiest way to create the most profitable practice out there, for sure, hands down. Doing just bread and butter dentistry is probably not going to get you to where you want to be. So I just love that. I just love that.
It makes it challenging.
Yep, absolutely. I also think being honest, I love being honest about your production, and then also focusing on you can produce it all day long. We've got to make sure we've got great collection systems and great, systems to make sure we're connecting with our insurance companies and our patients, communicating to our patients elegantly what their portion is so that we can actually get paid on all the hard work that we do. I think that's massively important. Yeah.
100%. So, a couple things that I was just wondering is, what are some of the biggest challenges that you think dentists face when it comes to implementing their strategic plan? And, do you have any ways, Kim, let's talk about those ways, I guess, of overcoming those obstacles, right? The implementation phase. What does that look like for you, and how do you get your doctors to overcome some of the obstacles of implementation?
Yeah, absolutely. The obstacles are many over the years I've seen. And so really, sometimes it starts with the doctor not communicating to their team what the destination looks like, what the dream is, what the vision is. They've got it in their head, and sometimes they think, well, they should know. They work with me every day. but really sitting down and articulating that to the team so that they can see, the team can see that the doctor needs the team just as much as they need the doctor. So really that collaboration, and that might be, taking some time out of the office and connecting with them, or sitting down at a team meeting, taking some production side time away and saying, this is what I really want, and I'm excited for you guys to be along for the ride, especially right now with our current state of team members, being able to go to different practices. They want to be in a place where they feel appreciated and where they feel like they are making a difference in other people's lives. So that is huge. And then you already mentioned it, if they don't track the results and they don't monitor what's actually happening, they're gonna have an obstacle. And the other thing is, I would say, not setting aside time to be the CEO of their business. They didn't just buy a practice. They didn't just buy a practice to give themselves a good job. If you are a practice owner these days, you need to take on that CEO role. And I find if they don't do that, they find a pitfall.
Yeah, it certainly makes it a lot harder if they aren't taking on that leadership responsibility and that CEO mentality. It
Yes.
doesn't happen by chance. So as many as we plan our clinical days, I think it's also important to make sure they're planning some administrative or CEO days and what that would look like for them.
For sure. Okay, Curtis, I know you have worked with several practices and you have practices of your own. What are some inspiring stories about practices that have actually implemented this plan and been massively successful?
Oh, there's certainly been a lot of them, right? I know that when we're in the annual planning process, a lot of our offices set some pretty, audacious goals, right? They set some really, really big goals. And, as much as we like to plan to try and make sure those goals are real and we hit those goals, sometimes you don't know if it's actually going to happen or not. And the other thing that I will say that takes place is that the plan that you set out to achieve might change, and you have to be okay with that, right? I can't tell you how many times we've set out for an annual plan for one of our offices that we might own or one of our clients. And next thing you know, you've got a couple people on maternity leave. You're losing a provider because of that. Now you got to kind of reignite that fire within your team. You got to re-strategize and replan. But I would say that my favorite success stories are the ones who can get back on track and start driving in the right direction again. Right? They don't let a little thing like a couple people get it being out of the office for whatever reason deter them from actually reaching their goals. Just a quick story. I had a large group practice, has five locations. They had a number of people on maternity leave to the tune of 8 people all at the same time. And they have 55 employees, so you can imagine losing 8 people. Well, what they were able to do is they were able to bring in a temporary provider. They didn't lose a beat. They were able to shift people around. And so many people rose to the occasion and came to the table to support all the people that were out in that interim. And they absolutely got things back on track, and they were able to hit their goals over the course of the year, which was pretty cool. So those are the success stories that I love.
That is amazing. I love it. Well, it's not the strongest survive; it's the most adaptable that survive, right? So
We know
and
that.
actually
Yeah.
thrive, right? I agree with that. I noticed that obviously we have tons of changes that happen in our practices and in our industry that we've just got to roll with those punches and be creative and be resourceful. I would also say the practices that truly commit to sticking with their systems around scheduling to production or scheduling to goal and understanding that time is their most valuable resource, they're the ones that truly can execute on it, and they realize that they're able to spend more time with their patients and enroll larger treatment plans as in addition to hitting their goals, and go home and have more energy to spend with their families every evening. So I would say just sticking to some of those basic systems to execute on your goal is huge.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
absolutely. So, Kim, there's no doubt that incorporating your team into the plan is important, as we mentioned. So what are some ways that you've been able to, or that you've seen, team buy-in, or ways that you can ensure that the team has bought into that annual plan and being able to collaborate on it?
Absolutely. So again, I always go back to, the doctor's vision, but really focusing on their why. What is their why, and communicating that, and again, enrolling them in the destination. The other thing is, doctors, you gotta, what did Gandhi say? Be the change you seek in the world. When you are being who the culture that you want to see in the practice, you're showing up on time, you're communicating elegantly, you're holding up your end of the bargain, the team members are going to be a lot more likely to do that as well, and to lead or to follow your lead. And I think having the mindset of I'm a leader leading leaders is also huge, because you can grow exponentially the more people who really adopt a leadership mindset on your team. And the other thing is, I would say, focus on an attitude of gratitude. The more grateful you are for what you have in this world and how appreciative you are of your team goes a long way. And it's a genuine thank you and a genuine gratitude. And I know, we talked earlier in this conversation about the BAM bonus system, making sure that your team knows that you're sharing the profits with them, because they're working just as hard as you are on making this practice as successful as possible. So that's
Sure.
what I would say.
Yeah,
What do you have to add to
absolutely.
that?
Well, I think the last comment that you made about making sure the team knows about that BAM and that it is truly you sharing in that profit. A lot of times I think that an office will have the BAM structure in place, the bonus structure in place, and they'll kind of forget that that's actually the fact of the matter, is that the doctor's taking money out of their pocket and giving it back to them, right?
Right.
And I think that when you can show an office that, or a whole team of people that, that they become more appreciative, right? They understand what they're working for. They understand that they are getting rewarded along the way, and it's not just some fishbowl game where they're picking out surprises along the way, right? They're working
Exactly.
towards something, and they're able to actually benefit from it, and the doctor's giving up something along the way.
Exactly. And then, of course, we know that they're gaining even more in the future. This is a marathon, not a sprint, right? The more the team members get excited about that BAM bonus system, the more proactive they actually become. So they're just
Sure.
not looking at this month's production. They're looking at next month's production. They're looking at what kind of big cases can we enroll? What clear aligner therapy are we doing? What can we get this doctor busy doing? And the whole practice culture just shifts. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit, Curtis, about the KPIs. What are the specific KPIs? I know you already mentioned a few
Yeah.
that we should monitor.
Yeah, there's certainly some that I didn't touch on yet that are coming to my mind here. One is the quantity of days per year, right? How many days per week does a doctor work, translated into how many days per year does that doctor actually show up in the practice and provide dentistry, right? I think that's a really important KPI to get every doctor familiar with. I also, think that it's important that every doctor has a minimum number of days that they aim to work, right? I'm not a huge fan of a doctor leaving for 2 weeks in a certain given month, and next thing you know, they're only working 8 days in that month, right? I
Hmm.
think they need to have a little foresight and think about how's this going to impact my business, how's this going to impact my team,
Yeah.
right? And be able to cover those days, right?
Yes.
The other thing that I look at is when we set some type of annual production goal. Right. I think that we have this annual production goal, but I also think that we need to have some type of monthly production minimum goal that we're shooting for,
Yep.
right? Where it's not just an annual goal that translates to a daily goal. It's an annual goal that translates to a monthly minimum goal.
Hmm.
And subsequently, what happens is that ends up being your monthly minimum number of days that you would have to work to fit within that confines of that monthly minimum goal. And then what can actually happen is, say you've got 16 days as your monthly minimum goal. Well, what happens if you work 18 days? Does that mean you get to lower your daily goal? Not the
No.
way I teach it, right? Not the way
No,
I teach
no.
it. You
Yep.
still have that daily minimum goal as well. That you work 18 days. Now all of a sudden your monthly goal is now higher than that minimum of that annual, kind of divided into 12. So from a
Absolutely.
KPI standpoint, I think that's a good place to actually look, as far as making sure that you've got enough bandwidth or production to cover all those costs for yourself.
Precisely. And those months that they do work those 18 days, that gives that doctor freedom that maybe next month they do take a week off, and
Yeah,
the practice is doing okay, because of course we want them to have a little bit of life balance or extraordinary life along with their extraordinary practice. But I think that's some great insight. I would also say that the more advanced practices, and I know that you also look at this, they can do a daily goal, and a lot of advanced practices are also looking at an hourly goal and chunking it down by the hour. So
that's
we
right.
know if a doctor has a shorter day, we know what they're able to produce. And I think when you put your mind to it, you'd be surprised what you can produce in 4, 5, 6 hours before you go off on a Friday afternoon to your weekend away. So
For
that's
sure.
awesome. That's awesome.
And just one more thing I want to comment on that. So we
Yeah,
keep talking about goals, right? We're
sure.
tracking goals. We're trying to make sure that we've got our daily goal, our hourly goal, our daily goal, weekly, monthly, and annual goal, right?
Hmm.
I think it's also very appropriate that a team knows what their break-even point is around all of those different numbers as well. So what's their hourly break-even point, right? What's
Yes.
their daily break-even point, their weekly, monthly break-even point, essentially what's it take over the course of the year to make sure you're covering these expenses, right? Because there's that gap there, right, between BAM and goal. And sometimes if we fall short of the goal, that's okay because we're still above break-even. But if we fall below break-even, that's when we got to make sure we're figuring out why and how to get back on the right track.
Absolutely. And I think to reiterate that or to emphasize that, the team needs to know that it's okay to work for a profitable company. In fact, you want to work for a profitable company, right? Because what do we get to do with some of that profit? Well, if we want to buy some more equipment or build out that sixth operatory or hire that sterilization tech or that other hygienist, all those things take money, right? So I think getting that team into that mindset. And then, of course, we always say that at Fortune, money is just a yardstick that shows you how much value you've given to your patients and to your team. So you make more money because you've given more value and you've helped people chew and laugh and eat and smile and sing. And so really staying connected with that. So
Absolutely.
Curtis, what do you think about doctors connecting sort of their strategic plan to their work-life balance? Like how do you see those two intersecting?
So, you know, work-life balance can be a tough conversation sometimes,
Sure.
right? You know, because we all have 24 hours in the day, 365 days in the year, and so when I'm thinking about work-life balance, what I'm really thinking about is being intentional with my time,
Yep.
right? I know my kids would take an hour of my undivided attention over 6 hours of my attention that's not necessarily there when I'm mentally somewhere else, right?
Yep.
I remember, if I were to rewind this conversation, maybe 7, 8 years ago, I started to feel like when I wasn't at my practice, I needed to be there, right? And if I was at my practice, I needed to be back at my house with my family. And so one thing that I kind of learned to get really good at is to understand that where I am right now is where I need to be, right? And be intentional with that time that I'm spending there. That way I can be, emotionally and physically and mentally present to give it my all while I'm there. Then when I go back with my family, I can do the exact same thing.
Yep.
So for me, it's not really work-life balance, but it's about being intentional with the time that I'm spending in either category of my life. How about yourself?
Love it. Love it. Yes, you took the words right out of my mouth. I mean, I also love, I joke with people, does anybody else get more than 24 hours in a day? Because if you do, I'd love to know what your secret is, right? But we all just get that. So making choices around when you're spending time on your health, on your fitness, on your spirituality, on your emotional fitness, on your, reading and learning about being a better leader. The better you are, doctors, in the other areas of your life, the better clinician and the better leader you're going to be within your practice. So
100%.
making choices around those times, and Curtis, I love how you said it, being intentional about the choices that you're making with your time is crucial to having that. And again, the work-life balance, I actually think it's kind of a myth. It's who said that there is no work, there is no play, there's just life. So if you can be focused on whoever and being present with whomever you're present with at that given moment, whether it's a team member, a patient, your spouse, your buddy, yourself, whatever it is, I think that will help you not feel like life is running you, but you are really running your life. And maybe taking some time out, whether it's going on a retreat or taking even just a Sunday afternoon to be with yourself and maybe take a look at your life wheel and your level of fulfillment in different areas of your life. What is my level of fulfillment in my emotional life, my friends and family, my relationships, my money life, my financial life, my work
Yeah,
life, my spirituality and contribution? Where, what does that, and what do I want it to look like? And it doesn't always take more time, maybe just more focus in different times of our life. And we also have to remember we have different seasons of our life, right? I now have
that's right.
teenagers. It's a different season when they were toddlers, and it'll be a different season than when I'm an empty nester. And so I think it's about being kind to yourself and knowing wherever you are, like you said, it's just perfect.
It's
So
just perfect. Yep.
that's awesome.
Can't beat yourself up over it. Yeah,
That's right.
absolutely. So, what are some of the biggest trends and opportunities that you see in the dental field today, or the dental profession? Maybe some things that dentists should be aware of. Maybe it's goal setting trends, but how do you think that they should think about the future of their practice and some of those trends?
Yeah, absolutely. The most successful dentists, as you know, Curtis, or the most successful practices are where the owner doctor or doctors, depending on if they're a partnership, that there's somebody that's taking on that CEO role or that, and also the clinical director role That CEO role, though, where you're really forecasting, you're looking at the future, you're making sure that all of the areas of your practice, I went over the 5 business engines earlier, all those areas are where you want them to be, and that you are leading your team to get to that next level. And maybe that means that you're not holding a handpiece 4 or 5 days a week. In fact, it probably isn't. Taking that time to look at your profitability, to look at your systems in the practice, and make sure that you're moving the practice in the right direction. So it's really having nothing to do with dentistry, really. I mean, not nothing to do with it. You've got the clinical ideas and how you want the practice to run, but really taking on that CEO mentality and looking at your leadership. Because what we know with the trends that's happening in dentistry, the practices that maybe are falling short of some of those things might be getting purchased or merged or acquired. And if that's not what you want your path to be, then you got to take on the business side. What would you
Yeah.
say, Curtis?
Well, I'm never going to tell an office what their plan should look like or their goal should be, right? Some owners want to have multiple locations or just a larger, single location with lots of people and lots of patients and more operatories. Some people just want to refine what they have, right? Some people just want to make their processes better to, have a better vision or a better, practice at a smaller location. But whatever it is, whatever size practice you have, one thing that I am very passionate about is making sure that you have a very sound organizational structure and an organizational chart. Right. That's, how many people do I have in my business? Where do they sit on the bus? Right. What's the hierarchy of responsibility within that organizational chart? Right. So that's really step number 1 of this planning process, where step number 2 is, identifying with your goals that you've created, pairing that new organizational chart with where you want to go. Right. Remember growing my organization, I still do this, a few times a year. I say, where am I now? What seats do I have open? Who are we hiring for? But, when I hit all of my goals at the end of 2024 or end of 2025, what is my organizational chart going to need to look like in order to support all of those different growth goals that we hopefully have hit? Because the other thing is that it ties back to monetary collections, because you can't really bring on a whole bunch of people if you can't afford to do that. So you have to do it safely.
That's right.
And so I have a very, very sound way to do it safely in order to make sure that you're not overextending yourself. The other thing we talked about earlier was forecasting for our capital investments, right?
Yeah.
Making sure that we've got enough money there to reinvest into our business, because, things like the new Prime Scan 2 just came out, right? You got all these new pieces of technology that, if you've got a old Omnicam, you might want to be financially ready to reinvest into that next piece of technology. And for me, it's been about an every 2-year swing, especially for that piece of technology.
Yeah.
Right? You want to be ready for it, but all technology has different shelf lives, right? But you want to at least make sure you're taking a look at that as well. So I would say from a trend standpoint, where you need to be aware of, I would say it's organizational structure and what that looks like, as well as your capital investments. Those are some things that can creep up on you if you're not ready, can kind of take you by surprise.
For sure. Couldn't agree with you more. So, Curtis, let's say a doctor's watching this and they're curious about where do they even start to create an annual plan for next year. What would you say to them?
Oh, man. Well, I think you got to go through a lot of discovery about what's important to them and why it's important.
Yes.
Right. I have a hard time starting to create some type of goal setting plan if I don't know why that goal that I have is there. Right.
Yep.
We've all heard 80% why, 20% how. And for me, it's really like, going back to what's important. Why is it important? Why do I want it? And make sure all those stars still align. Right? Because what used to be important to me, 4, 5, 6 years ago might not be as important to me anymore. I might need to revise my strategy for that. The other thing I'll add on there is that, it's you don't want to get overwhelmed with it. It can be an overwhelming process. However, what my goal is to do with my doctors is to help them not be overwhelmed by kind of chunk sizing it down.
Yeah.
Right. It's like when I was younger, my room used to be really messy. My mom would say, clean up your room. I'd go in there and I'd just sit there because I didn't know what to do with it. And she'd walk in and she'd say, Curtis, just pick up something and put it away. Right. So the annual planning process can kind of be the same way. Don't be overwhelmed with it. Plan 1 or 2 things. Right. Then plan a couple more and see how your plan kind of unravels or I guess gets executed on once you kind of have that sound plan step by step going for you.
I love that. Yeah, what I always think about, one thing at a time is huge advice. That's awesome, because sometimes we can get into perfection paralysis where we want to change everything all at once, right? I also would say, hey, have a reality check as to where you are now. Like we talked about in the beginning of this conversation, where you are truly right now and what you want 12 months from now and what it's going to take. And we sometimes are, um, you know, can't believe what we can get done in a year, right? We actually can get a lot done in a year. I also would say talk to a coach. You know, maybe a coach can help you sift through a couple of these vision questions and find out what's most important to you so that you can put the right plan in place. And just remember, like you mentioned, your 5 years ago goals might be different than your current goals, that it's a marathon, not a sprint, right? So what
Sure.
you're going to do next year might be one step, but the year after could be a larger step. But everything compounds upon itself, right? And
Yeah.
so the better you do next year, you're going to have exponential growth the years after that. If you do all of these things, like put the plan in place, and I love what you talked about with the structure. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. No
and
doubt.
yeah,
Well, Kim, I would say that I know we've got a lot of really great annual planning events going on all over the country,
yes,
right? So, I'm teaching five on my, in my markets alone, right?
yep,
And one thing that I think is pretty cool is that we open it up to, non-clients from time to time. And so what my partner Todd and I have committed to do is to do this in our markets, to be able to open it up for non-clients to talk with us before coming to that meeting. We're going to give them a power coaching session to make sure that they can understand what takes place at that event,
yep,
to really kind of open our doors to see what we're all about because of all the success that we have with our clients. And, it doesn't happen by chance. We spend a lot of time, energy, and effort on it. And so I think that for everyone listening to this podcast, I think it'd be great to see if there's a annual planning going on in your market where you live, because I think all the other fortune coaches out there would be more than happy to have a conversation with you to bring
absolutely.
you in to kind of show you what a good job looks like.
Absolutely. We are actually, last time I checked, Curtis, I think there's about 65 or 70 annual
Wow,
plannings going on between, say, November and January, all across
that's
this great
incredible.
country of ours. Yes. So if you are curious, you can absolutely be our guest and get, like Curtis mentioned, a power coaching session and come and see what we're all about and really crunch some numbers and create a plan for yourself and your practice so you can at least create the path to massive success in 2025.
I love it.
Yes, it's been awesome connecting with you, Curtis. Thanks for taking some time.
Yeah, likewise, Kim, and I look forward to seeing you soon and helping as many people kind of achieve those plans as possible. So let me know if there's anything I can do to help.
Love it. Thanks so much.